Welcome back. Leeds United have beaten Manchester United at Old Trafford this evening to give their survival chances a huge boost. But we move the conversation on to the greatest central midfielders that we've ever seen in the Premier League era, and we're joined by one here this evening in Roy Keane. Roy, what would you say makes a great central midfield?
Well, obviously, the way I was brought up and the way I played was I used to like midfielders who could do a bit of everything. I know the game has changed. We're talking about sit midfielders and attack midfielders, but I like midfielders who've done a bit of everything. Who could obviously defend, can get forward, or athletic, who get you a goal. Yeah, they're the type of midfielders I was drawn to and I used to watch. Particularly when I was younger, obviously I was a big fan of people like Glenn Hoddle, his technical ability. Enjoyed watching, obviously, Brian Robson when I was younger. I loved his courage and his bravery and getting into the box and his time. And so, yeah, I kind of look for the full package, really.
Roy, I just ask you, you said the way that the modern game isn't, and we talk about it when you hear young kids coming through, they almost talk about shirt numbers, don't they? A 6, an 8, a 10. So they almost have a function. There's almost like 3 functions in a sort of midfield. But what you're talking about in classing yourself is almost like a midfield player. What you're talking about, you think of sort of Brian Robson, I think of Peter Reid playing for Everton when I was a kid, or Steve McMahon, these type of players. They did a bit of everything. Yeah,
and I think, obviously, most of the teams I played in throughout my career generally played 4-4-2. So I was obviously in a 2. So at some stage, one of the midfielders would get forward and the other would sit. And then sometimes, like, people always talk about chemistry, I might add, with Incy or Scholesy or Butty or people like that. And we would say, how does it work? And you go, well, if one went forward, I would just sit in, or if I went. And it was just, honestly, as simple as that. So again, that was the type of the midfielder I kind of played with, and I kind of warmed towards. But obviously the systems changed now and then. People start talking about having an out-and-out, like, sitting midfielder. And I suppose in my younger as a Forest, I was probably just getting kind of more box to box. But as you get a bit older and you find out more about being a team player, I then tried to become more of a kind of a sit midfielder and maybe trying to control games a bit more, which was a challenge. But as you get a bit older and you get more experience, you kind of obviously adapt to it.
It's a game of opinions, isn't it? And yours might be different to Jamie's, and I'm sure people at home will have a very different opinion to Jamie's. They normally do. But this is just for fun. Remember that as well. Yeah. We've set you a real challenge here, Jamie, as well, because we've tried to get you to find 10 names from this long list. Is there anyone that we sort of had to discount, or you would have had to discount in terms of that position?
When I was given this list this morning, the one I argued that shouldn't be there, and he is one of my favourite players, is actually David Silva. And the reason I say that is because when I think of David Silva, I think more of left midfield. It's like David Beckham for me is a great midfielder, but he was a right midfielder. I wouldn't expect him to be on the list, even though at times he did play centrally. I class him more as a wide player. I know David Silva's not a winger. I get that, but I think in the main, I know he played a little bit of central under Pep Guardiola, but in the main, I see him more as sort of a wide midfield player, not a winger. So that tells you he didn't make the top 10.
Right, let's get to your top 10 then, and let's start with number 10, a young man who's doing very well as a rookie manager as well this season with Como, but Cesc Fabregas is your pick at number 10. Jamie, what did you like about him?
Listen, he was a fantastic footballer. I think he makes his debut at Arsenal at 16. Probably doesn't win doesn't sort of win the biggest trophies at Arsenal, but he's definitely almost like the main player from a very young age. He then goes to Barcelona, you think what he did at Spain, but then he comes back to the Premier League and he wins the league, I think, with Jose Mourinho at Chelsea. But also, he's got the most assists in the Premier League, or second most in the Premier League.
So he's certainly that sort of creative type, isn't he, Cesc Fabregas? You're talking about someone who can do a bit of everything, Roy, but he certainly had the vision as a central midfield player, didn't he?
Oh, excellent player. And all these stats, obviously, you know these stats are coming behind these players. But even the first list there, huge respect for all those players and what they brought to their teams. Even people like, it's nice to remember people like David Baddy and Gary Speed. And all these players would give you different problems. And then when Gerrard was coming through, they were more like, it can cause you different type of problems. So all excellent players, and brought something to the Premiership, and more importantly, brought something really valuable to their teams. And that was winning football matches, assists and goals. Yeah, fantastic. I like amazing stats.
We'll see how many more of those on that creators list, if you like, feature in Jamie's top 10. But the next one at number 9, I suppose you'd call definitely a number 6, and a very good one.
Yeah, he's fantastic. And don't forget, Manchester City have had a lot of players in that position, and a lot of top players in that role. But for me, he is the best. He scored the winning goal in the Champions League final. He's won a major tournament with Spain while he was at Manchester City. What I would say is, though, I think it probably took him 12 months to sort of get up to speed in the Premier League. I think there was a feeling when he first came in that they probably still missed Fernandinho, I think was the one just before him. But right now, I think he's making a huge difference in this title race right now. You know, I think sort of that calmness, that presence. Obviously, Roy was, and myself were talking earlier on about Arsenal's midfield now, right at this minute, almost struggling a little bit. He went down, I think, in the game on Sunday, and I think that would have been a real fear for Manchester City if he wasn't going to play at the weekend, because that's how important he is now. And I think it was a season or two ago, he got a bad injury. I think that was one of the...
It's crucial, yeah.
So that was what I'm saying is Liverpool then go on to win the league. Who knows if that happens if he stays fit? Because at that time he almost felt like he was the most important sort of central midfield player in the league.
He had that extraordinary run, didn't he? Where over the course of pretty much a season, he didn't lose an entire game for club or country. So I can reveal that Fernandinho has not made your top 10. You've almost gone Rodri over Fernandinho. Fernandinho won multiple titles. Roy, he was that back four protector and much more.
Another brilliant player. But I'm not going to disagree with it. I think Rodri, fantastic player, big presence out in the middle of the park, can nick you a goal. All these players, I have nothing but respect for them and nothing but good things to say about them. I thought they were big influences on their teams. And also with Rodri, people underestimate how big he is. He's that big physical presence in the middle of the park. Because we talk about the technical ability of Man City, but they're big and strong. And of course, we know the importance of set pieces and both doing the job for and against. So yeah, I'm going to get quite embarrassed here, because when you're trying to compare players, to me, all these players are technically way ahead of me, absolutely. But it's just what you can bring to your team. And I think what helped me in my career, I was surrounded by some brilliant players at United, which kind of carried me, really.
Well, we haven't got to you yet, Roy.
If I'm in the top 10, yeah.
Well, I'm not sure.
We'll see.
So, we'll find out. But there is another Manchester City player next, Jamie, and he was a real all-rounder, wasn't he, Yaya Toure?
Yeah, he was almost like a cheat code, I felt, for a few years for Manchester City. And it wasn't just central midfield. A lot of times, he used to just go into that number 10 position. And all the players who are on there, Roy's right, they're absolutely amazing players, world-class players. He was the one more than most who almost felt like he was a man playing in a kid's game. When he used to run past him, I don't think anybody could stop it. He just couldn't stop it. It was some sight seeing him go from that, midfield position. I actually remember him playing, I think he played centre-back. Did I ever got that right? In a Champions League final against, Manchester United when he was at Barcelona. So he could play centre-back in a Champions League final, central midfield, goes number 10 as well. Mancini used to always make that swap and make a substitution and put him to number 10. But for a few seasons, it was just like seeing him run through midfield. No one in the Premier League could stop him.
And could score outrageous goals.
Oh, brilliant. Like, again, a big part of my game and what I admire about other midfielders, even when I was growing up and playing, I love the physicality. I love the battle of midfield. And he definitely brought physicality and obviously a level of skill. Yeah, I wouldn't be disagreeing with having him, in the top 10, absolutely.
We do
could be higher.
We do have a Manchester United player at number 7, Roy, but it's Paul Scholes. Tell us what you think of him as a central midfielder. As someone you played alongside.
Yeah, brilliant player. And I always think when there's a level, when you're talking about midfielders in the middle of the park who can get you a goal, to me that's another X factor. And Scholes, he could get you a goal, and important goals with you, and a brilliant teammate to have. We had obviously some good days, we had some tough days, but when we played well together again, we had good chemistry again. When people asked Scholes about playing with me, he'd go.
Why did it work?
Well, obviously, as I was getting older, then Scholes' big strength, to be fair, is getting on the end of things. And when he got on the end of it, obviously he could finish. And it just suited me as I was getting a bit older. I was then more happy to sit in. So just the chemistry, and obviously we could both deal with the ball. We were both dealing comfortable with the expectation at Man United. Obviously, Scholes came through as a kid. So yeah, and it was just nice vibes. And, we never spoke too much to each other. We just got on with it. And Scholes again, I think when a player starts scoring important goals and getting the double figures, like the Lampards and the Gerrards, you're like, yeah, that's pretty special if you can start scoring big goals.
11 Premier League titles, the most of any central midfield. Does that have to be a big factor in this list as well, Jamie?
Yeah, huge. Of course it is. And you look at that, you look at the company he's with, but he's not just with that company, he's far ahead of that company. We're looking at some of the best players we've ever seen in the Premier League. The thing I love about Paul Scholes, and I think most people who talk about him and who played with him, obviously I played a little bit with England and trained with them, that a lot of players on this list have got great physical qualities as well. It's not just the footballing ability, you know, they're powerful, they can run. We've just been, you know, talking about Yaya Toure. Paul Scholes didn't really have any of that. So he had a lot of it.
Smart though, Jimmy. He had to be smarter, I think.
Exactly.
So even when he used to drift into these areas and you see him drifting in, again, that's football intelligence and a lot of crosses at United with Bex we were putting in Giggsy. And I think a lot of teams thought, it's only Scholes, obviously he's quite small, but his timing and his finishing as an aerial threat, it was fantastic. And a bit like Brian Robson. I think it's very hard to coach that, a midfielder. There's different type of midfielders on there, but Scholes getting into these positions and drifting, I don't think you can coach that. I think they just, like Casemiro tonight, people get on the end of stuff. Scholes was brilliant at that, and a lot of times did finish it.
The thing about him as well is he was different in terms of English midfielders. Normally when you think of an English midfielder, you think of, obviously, the types like Brian Robson, Roy Keane, Steven Gerrard, Lampard. It's almost like this thing of like, it's got to be box-to-box and energy. He was almost like a Barcelona, Real Madrid type of central midfield, and we don't normally create those type of players in England.
And low maintenance as well. I think it's important the personality. Scholes is well documented. Would come in, do his work, go home, and yeah, quite a low-key kind of personality.
What a player at number 6 who won back-to-back Premier League titles with 2 different teams. N'Golo Kante. Jamie, what gets him to number 6 on?
You know what? I think for 3, so he wins. The thing that he's done that nobody else on this list has done is won the league with a team that shouldn't win the league. Now, we might sit here and say it was a bit of a freak season because, you know, Leicester were fighting relegation the year before and they fight relegation the year after. Kante's only there 1 season. They win the league in that season. But it wasn't just a fluke for him, because he goes straight to Chelsea, wins the league again the year after, and gets Player of the Year, PFA Player of the Year. He then wins the World Cup with France. So it was just like, who's this guy? And then for years it was everybody saying, we want our N'Golo Kante. You know, because they got him cheap. The Leicester chief scout got the move to Everton on the back of signing him. And it was like, who's our Kante? Everybody wanted a Kante. And also, I think, normally when we see Player of the Years, it's normally one of the attacking players. So to be a central midfield player and win Player of the Year is pretty special. So he's on a fantastic list there as well.
Just missing out on that list, but I think will be on a lot of people's top 10 is Frank Lampard, who again did it differently, Roy, a bit of a goal machine.
Yeah, again, Frank. And obviously Frank had his trouble, he had a tough start to his career and he was getting heavily criticised and about his weight and etc. And he's only getting favours off his uncle and whatever it might be the case. But he went on to obviously prove to be a brilliant player. And again, I go back to it, when you can start putting the ball in the back of the net, and the type of goals he got, the important goals, fantastic. Frank was a brilliant player. And I get the impression Frank had to work hard. I don't think he was, a bit like me, I don't think it was natural to him. I think he definitely put the hours in and he got all his rewards for it, and his stats, fantastic.
Yeah, I've got so much admiration for him, because I think what Roy's saying there is spot on. When you've got superstars, English players coming through, your Gerrard, your Michael Owen, your Rio Ferdinand, they almost bypass England under 21s. And me and Frank roomed together for England under 21s, and Frank had to do his proper time in there, if you like, a good 2 or 3 seasons. He was the captain, I was the vice captain. To think he never really got in the England team till probably his mid-20s. To go on and win 100 caps, you know, what he did, where he took his game to. And I actually have probably more admiration for Frank than probably some of the other players on the list, because they probably way more talented. And that's not a criticism. This is a guy who finished 2nd in the Ballon d'Or 1 season when he was at Chelsea. You think of the goals he scored. I think he's Chelsea's greatest ever player of all time. Champions League winner, all the trophies he won in terms of the league, as I said, the 100 caps. And he was just an absolute goal machine. And you think it's just that spine of that Chelsea team.
And all seem to be fit, didn't it? You always have to give thumbs up for lads who were available week in, week out. A bit like Bruno at United. That's a big plus for a manager if you're available all the time and you're not on that treatment table.
Number 4 on Jamie's list is one of your greatest adversaries, Roy. Would he in fact be your greatest opponent, Patrick Vieira?
Yeah, Patrick, because of the rivalry at the time. Of course, the positions we played, the personality, the clashes we had. And we always knew when we played United, obviously against Arsenal, there was going to be a big battle in midfield. We talk about the spine of the team. And Patrick, a big guy, 6'3", 6'4". And some good battles.
Did you have to brace yourself for those challenges?
Physically you have to.
Did it hurt playing against you?
Yeah, it would physically, of course it would. But I hope it hurt them as well when they were playing against me. And that was part of the challenge. If I look back or I think about my career, fond memories against playing, particularly against Arsenal. Again, big personality. Again, big strong boy. Yeah, a bit younger than me, but yeah, enjoyed the battles. I miss him, and I still miss those battles.
Yeah. Well, he's on our side on Sunday on the sofa with us as we watch Manchester City take on Arsenal. Patrick Vieira, part of our team. So number 3, again, a very different player, Jamie, to that. Did you have actually with Kevin De Bruyne? Did you wrestle with his inclusion in this as a central midfield player, or is he straight in?
No, because I think of him as predominantly in that midfield 3 for Manchester City. He's, different to David Silva, who played a wider, as I mentioned. No, but probably similar to sort of Steven Gerrard in terms of a midfield play. Probably slightly different to sort of Roy and Patrick and other people who you see as sort of always in the centre of the pitch. There's no doubt he used to wander to the right, and he was, an attacking midfield player, almost like a number 10 at certain times. But I think he's the best passer of the ball I've seen in the Premier League. I mean, there's some great players on there who other people may argue, but some of the assists he used to have for Manchester City, and I think, and I say this a lot about the Jurgen Klopp Liverpool team, that Jurgen Klopp Liverpool team should have won a lot more for how good the team was. I think he was the difference. Liverpool didn't have him or that type of player in the midfield. So for me, he was the difference. And I go back to that game against Aston Villa, the last game of the season, where Man City are 2-0 down. I think Liverpool have just got a goal at home at Wolves or something.
Wolves, I think, yeah.
And Kevin De Bruyne basically just turns it on. And basically, Manchester City want to win a league title. And for me, he is Manchester City's greatest ever player of all time.
Yeah, I think when you're obviously, it's about opinions, but when you talk about the great midfielders of the Premier League, he's what I think he's the first that springs to mind for me. I just think he was an amazing player. Again, obviously, his goals, his assists. Again, I used to be jealous of players like that when I see him control the ball. I always thought it was a battle for me, but I used to see them control it, and again, the passes he used to produce. I used to say, oh my God, I thought he was an amazing player.
In my head, we've still got 2 pretty big names that haven't been mentioned. So let's see in which order they come out now. Drum roll, please. Number 2 on Jamie Carragher's list is Roy Keane. Talk to me about Roy Keane, the central midfield player.
I love Roy Keane as a player, even though I was playing for his biggest rivals. And the thing that, I wouldn't say annoyed me, but even when I was playing for Liverpool, I've always been obsessed with the game. I'd always be talking about the other teams, the other players. And Roy Keane used to get put in a box, as in put his foot in. And getting into the box, getting a goal. And for me, he was the best passer of the ball in the Premier League when he played. Now, you've said before about some of these players might be technically better than you, but for me, a great midfield player passing is not getting on the ball and spraying it wide to the fullback. Looks good, doesn't really do anything. I don't think anybody on that list was better than Roy Keane of finding his number 10. That play between the lines, that is the best ball in football for a midfield player. That's what hurts the opposition. Getting it into sort of Cantona and those positions, getting into Dwight York, getting into Teddy Sheringham, those great attacking players that Manchester United have. And for me, looking at that list there, there's lots of different players. I don't think anybody ran a game better than Roy Keane, and everything went through him in midfield. And obviously, we were on the back of so many games against Roy in there. And what I would say, he played with some great players. You think of Scholes, he getting on the ball. I actually remember Varane coming to United, and we played against us in a cup final, a Carabao Cup. God knows what it was called then. But I always feel there's only one man in a midfield who can be like, I'm the one who gets it off the back foot. Everyone's got a little different role, and you were the boss in midfield. So no matter who you played it with, whether that was Scholes, whether that was Varane, that was somebody else coming, you were the boss in midfield. And the ball went through you. And you sort of control games and ran games at the highest level of European football and Premier League for me.
I think one of my strengths, if I did keep the game simple. I did keep it simple, and I got good messages from even managers back in Ireland when I was younger. Of course, then Brian Clough and Alex Ferguson, and they kept it simple for me as well. So I think that was one of my strengths in terms of, you're on about passing it forward. That should be your first option anyway, as a midfielder. And the key as well, I was surrounded by brilliant players, but I did try and keep the game simple. Again, there's different midfielders up there, different strengths, different weaknesses, and I would have played against some players more than others. the one thing I'd always say, I felt when I was fit and I was in my prime, I would compete with any of them. I'd always be up for that challenge. Again, technically, other players would be a lot more than me. And it's also what you brought to your team, whether it be personality, getting onto people or encouraging people. And that was my game. It was quite simple, really.
Well, I would say, just because it's important, because what you just said there, and listen, we all know who's coming next. But the problem, I'm not sure how many captains are on there. What I'm saying is Roy Keane will be the captain of the central midfield players. There's no doubt about that. And it's not just about actually, ability.
Listen, I'll bring it back a little bit. I always think the longer, I know we played against each other, but sometimes your memory can play tricks. And I think sometimes the longer you're retired, people think you were a better player than what you actually were. I've never been, I know these discussions are interesting and it's all about opinions, but I'd have no issue with these players about who's on what list. I look at all these players, or even the first list, and go, yeah, if people think they're better than me, absolutely no problem. But I also had a strength. I knew what I was bringing to the team, and that was might be that bit of personality, or kind of never giving up, or chasing lost cause, or whatever it might be. And you need players like that in your team, even if it's at Man United or a small club. And I felt I brought them kind of simple messages to the team, when at United it can turn into a bit of a circus act. It can off the field stuff. Man United just, and I used to try and keep it real with what I was trying to do, and also with the lads in the dressing room.
But let me just ask you this: one thing, Roy. I mean, you told us a few stories off camera now and again about your sort of recovery periods at Manchester United, and the way that you would. How can I put this?
Oh, about being a professional. You've been a bad professional.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I just wonder sometimes. Do you ever think? I mean, you had an amazing career. What if you'd actually looked after yourself?
Yeah, better? But that's who I was, and they were the kind of bad traits I had when I was a bit younger. Even playing. Remember, I played League of Ireland, and in League of Ireland, you'd always have a few pints after the game. I can't be somebody I'm not. And obviously, it took a bit later for me to do my cruciate, where I thought I need to start looking after myself. But I also think that was part of my journey. You do daft stuff, and you only learn from your own mistakes, not from other people. And that was you have to take the good and the bad. And I do see some modern players now, and I take my hat off to them. They are top professionals, and they do everything perfect, and I didn't. And I'm sure that was the kind of the time we were in. And after a game, win or lose, you'd always go out and have a few drinks or whatever. When I'd got bad injuries, I'd go out and I'd go missing for days. I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, but you kind of have to make your mistakes as well. And then later on, 27, 28, you get a bit more mature and a bit more response. Then you become that better pro. But sometimes it's too late. Because ultimately, I finished when I was 34. I finished at 34 because of my lifestyle. I was doing silly stuff, picking up bad injuries, getting silly sending offs, and it had an effect. And then, I see modern players now who look after themselves, playing till they're 36, 30, playing at the highest level. But that wasn't I suppose, the path I was meant to go down, because I was doing daft stuff off the pitch. But
the thing I mentioned, Roy, there was actually his passing, and saying he doesn't get enough credit for that, his technical ability. But the big thing that was like your actual running power. Was that just natural? Was that something you had to sort of work on? Was you just like, you would be
when I was younger.
Cover every blade
when I was younger, the teams I played with in Ireland, or even all the training I used to do a little bit of boxing, and I was mad for the fitness. But when you're younger, and I was playing in midfield, it was, let's try and get yourself a goal. Run back, even as a young kid playing for Rockmount, gone back and help your teammates, playing League of Ireland, playing in different positions, trying to learn your trade. I'm now playing men's football, going to Nottingham Forest as a young kid. Brian Clough's instructions to me about pass it forward, and Stuart Pearce, Des Walker. I've mentioned them so many times, because as a young kid, you need good senior players to guide you. And then going to United at the time, and United just won the league. I walked into a brilliant dressing room. Robbo was still on the scene. I'm playing with Paul Ince, and then eventually later on, obviously, Scholesy and Bunty and all these lads. It was a dream scenario for me. So you're basically learning your trade as you're growing older without realising it. Before you know, you're 26, 27, you've played 300-400 league games, you're going, I should have an idea about the game now. Because we're talking about Arsenal, we're talking about what teams are going through now. There must come a point in your career where you have a bit of cop on, you're going, I don't need a manager to be telling me what to, I don't need to be looking at the sideline, I don't need coaching sessions. I've got an idea what the game's about. And obviously bringing that then into the big occasions, trying to win big games. But also, you can talk about the pluses. Your career can be obviously full of big disappointments, of course.
Roy Keane, number 2 on Jamie's list, on a fine list, which is topped by, yep, you guessed it, Steven Gerrard.
Yeah.
Surprise, surprise.
Cilla Black.
Tell us about the first time you saw him, Jamie, on a football pitch, and would you have known then what he would have become?
It's interesting really with Stevie, because even though I was only he was a couple of years below me, our paths didn't cross in the youth academy, because he was almost the first batch of the academy. So the academies used to train away from Melwood, whereas I was almost like the last of the old-fashioned way of coming through. So it wasn't like someone I knew in the youth team so well. I'd played at Lillishall, so I did, his name. Stephen Gerrard obviously knows he's a good player, but didn't really know too much about him. And as soon as he come in, very early on, you're thinking, wow, what is this? It was his pace and his energy around the pitch. And he basically came in and took Paul Ince's place as an 18-year-old, and Gerard Houllier moved on about different positions. And Roy could do this, play the holding role, play the attacking role. But actually, when you think of the three roles now, Stevie could play all them, 6, 8, 10. I'm not saying he'd been as good as Roy as the 6, but there's not many players on that list could actually play all three of them at a very high level. Actually did a job at right back and right midfield at different times. And I know a lot of people will say, how can he be the best Premier League midfielder? He hasn't won the Premier League. But the way I flip that is number one, he's been the best player in the league. He's had the trophy like Roy has. But that's a big one that stands out for me, that where the players in your division, he's been picked in the PFA Team of the Year more than anybody, more than any other outfield player in the history of the game. And it's not even just the Premier League. Going back to when the PFA Team of the season started, nobody has ever been picked in it more than Steven Gerrard. I think that says a lot when, the players who you play against you week in, week out, pick you in that team. And another way of looking at the thing where I say, well, didn't win the league. We didn't win the league. We'd have loved to have won the league. But I just think of other midfield players on the list and think, if we'd have took Steven Gerrard out of our team and put them in it, would that have meant we won the league? I'm not sure. They would have had the impact in my Liverpool team that Steven Gerrard did at that time. And obviously you think of the two games that stand out, and Roy has his obviously unbelievable performance in Juventus semi-final of the Champions League. And that's what defines a lot of these players as well. Big games, you be in there. That's what Roy's talking about earlier on today, which with Arsenal going to Manchester City, I love Declan Rice, but I want to see him go and boss that game. I was a little bit disappointed with him in the cup final, because I think he's almost like a Roy Keane type figure, but he's still got to do it in that big game. And what Stevie did in that FA Cup final, and what Stevie did in the Champions League final, especially, you think of the players he was up against in that Champions League final, Pirlo, Gattuso, Seedorf.
That's good for us. Yeah, no, it's good. When we were playing, and lads were coming through different age groups, again, Frank Lampard, a few years younger than me, Gerrard, and it was good. And the same when I was making my way, and I'm playing against Robbo, when I'm playing for Forest, of course, you're looking going, and you're after these players, because players are on a bit of an ego trip. I want to take your... And I had that when Gerrard, even your own teammates coming through United, and it's great, because you need that. You see these young players coming through, go, yeah, and you're like, as soon as they come on the scene, you're like, yeah, these are decent. these are here to stay, put it that way, yeah.
But obviously, because I've seen Stevie's journey from the bottom to, not the bottom, but sort of when he started to the top. Roy and Patrick Vieira were unbelievable for him. Because early on, Stevie was not, I wouldn't say he was cocky, but he was confident because he was doing so well. He's like this new star on the scene. And there was definitely the FA Cup final in 2000 when we beat Arsenal, but Patrick Vieira ran over him all right throughout the game. And I think it was a little bit, I've still got another level to go. And there was games like that against Roy as well, where you think, they're the two big... Like,
but you need them, though. Yeah. That's all part of your...
Exactly.
I remember playing against Gaza, again, when I was a young player first, and I was looking at Gaza, and I couldn't get near him, and he was doing it. And you're going, these are the levels you want to get to. And they're all valuable lessons, even though they hurt at the time. But when you come up against really top players, you go, I want to try and get to that. And then you go to Zidane level and all these lads, and they're like a target for you.
I could chat these great players all night, but I'm afraid, are going to have to say goodbye. Gary Neville's been at it as well. He's been picking his top 5 greatest midfield players.
Because he doesn't know 10.
We only gave him a list of 6. You can download the Sky Sports app and you can hear that on there as well. And maybe, Roy, you might want to have a listen on the way home. I'll give you a slight tease. There might be a different number 1.